Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Float Activity. Today's guest, Meredith Baker, is a Harvard and Oxford graduate, a 25-time marathon runner, a 500-hour trained yoga, meditation, and breathwork facilitator. Meredith is a leadership coach and facilitator who has led thousands of people through transformative experiences. Leveraging her time as an international journalist, a beverage founder, and a mindfulness practitioner, Meredith has developed a unique and approachable methodology to help leaders maximize their professional impact and personal fulfillment, both through executive coaching and team facilitations. I can't wait to dive into this episode, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome to Float Activity, a place to inspire and empower beings to embrace self-love and self-development for an achievable balance of productivity. I share different ways to come back to your intuition through spirituality, self-care, human design, cycle planning, wellness, and everything in between. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you've been here with me before, thank you so much for coming back. I'm so excited to join you in this journey as we learn together. Hi, Meredith. Welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here, especially with a name like Float Activity, because I feel like that's something we all strive for, being in our flow, also being productive.
Productivity for me has definitely changed over the years. I used to be like in the hustle mentality, and that burned me out. And so I was trying to figure out a way that I could be like efficient as possible, but to be like within myself while doing it. And so I use things like human design, my cycle, the moon, just to kind of get aligned with the universe. And so that's ultimately where Float Activity came from.
I think that's amazing. And I think that's honestly like kind of cracking the code on how we harness our personal power is when we know that it's not about, working hard to the point of burnout, but taking time and stillness to learn ourselves to be in tune with what our body, our, intuition is telling us, and then acting efficiently from that place. So yes to all. I love it.
Well, I think that leeways right into my favorite question I always ask my guests about what is some of your favorite self-care practices that you try to incorporate daily or however often you can get to that self-care?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, it's kind of a constant iterative process and kind of going through seasons where I crave doing different things. But usually in the morning, it looks like waking up. I love waking up with the sun or before the sun and doing some sort of journaling practice. Right now, I'm loving the Wild Unknown journal by Kim Krantz. She has a bunch of tarot decks as well, but it's kind of partially drawn in, and I have colored markers, so I'll journal and color at the same time, which just makes my inner child squeal with delight. And then doing some sort of meditation and breath work and movement in the morning is always a must for me. And then as a coach, kind of holding space for others all day, I try to be mindful midday to go out, to feel the sun on my face, to have a little walk without my phone. And similarly, when I'm closing out the day, to kind of release the energy of the day, I'll go sit on the beach. I'm very fortunate to live right on the beach in Venice and do a sunset meditation. So that's kind of my daily routine. And then in terms of like deeper maintenance, let's say each season, I'll do some sort of solo trip. So like maybe once a month, I'll go on a hike and I'll leave my phone at home and just have a full day. But then once every half year, I'll do some sort of like longer overnight solo trip. For example, I just did one in Big Sur 2 weeks ago, and I drove my car up to SF, saw some friends from college, and then went down through Carmel, went to an outdoor spa there, stayed at a monastery for 2 nights where I observed silence, and stayed with Camel D's monks for 2 nights, went glamping, and then went to Esalen, which is like it's been a center for human development since like the 1960s, and they're famous for their mineral hot springs. So it was just a week of slowing down and asking myself what my intuition is telling me, doing a check on everything that's going on in my life. Is it still feeling aligned? Is it still lighting me up? What is the next chapter look like, and really have the time to feel into that.
That's beautiful. I love all that. And I feel like that's so important. I have this like concept of like a float activity retreat, and it's a lot of that. It's ultimately connecting with your intuition, but I encourage people to kind of look at where they're at in their cycle, whether they're going to be more green resting or they're going to be out doing, adventures and just feeding their soul in whatever that is. And it sounds like you've already figured out how to do that for yourself. And I love that you said you went by yourself, right? For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, besides the visiting friends and stuff like that.
Yeah. And it was a great moment of really sitting with myself, because having a partner who is so supportive and is always down for adventure with me, the easy thing is to just do everything together. But I really felt intuitively that it needed to be a time where I was alone to really listen to myself. And then also, when I was at Esalen, which has a lot of other people come and stay for workshops and there's communal dining, it was great to kind of be like that middle school kid again, where you're like sitting with your tray of food, being like, can I sit with you guys? And if we go with a friend or a partner, which can be an amazing experience to share, and there's a time and season for that as well, we can use it as a crutch in those awkward moments where it just takes going and saying hi and asking a question to a new person to kind of open that portal to new connection.
Yes, I love that. A couple years ago, I had friends that were going on a girls' trip, and I actually opted to not go and go on a weekend on myself. And I think a lot of people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't really want to cram into a house and go drinking or do these things. Like, I need some time. I have two small kids. So, like, I ultimately needed time to myself to really focus on what I wanted instead of being in that hustle and bustle. It's hard. I have a very supportive husband. I try to ask for these like blocks of time, 24 hours where like I don't need to focus on anyone but myself. I can just nurture myself. First, it felt kind of selfish, but like as I do it, I think everybody around me sees when I take that time to focus on my needs, I can then help and it be in tune with the people around me and really help them grow. I think that's beautiful that you try to do it every month and that you go on a big trip like that. That's beautiful. I love that.
Thanks. So I was also going to say, to an earlier point of yours, I love that you think about, planning the energetics of what you're doing with your cycle. I think so many women, it's easy to feel disconnected from that, especially sometimes with different birth controls. Our cycles can feel like they've stopped altogether. And having come off birth control for the last 2 years, I really have gotten to notice like my luteal phase and right before like I start my period, and how like different my emotions are. And rather than kind of being in the hustle in that week or trying to output a lot, like using that time to really rest, recharge, recenter, and knowing that on the other side, that's going to be my time for like bigger expression. So I love that you do that. It's definitely awareness that I've come deeper into the last 2 years on that journey.
Yeah, it would be like my love for the world if women could understand, if they could just start retracting and just kind of take a step back from things about a week before their period, like how much maybe their symptoms or whatever they're happening during their period may actually get better if they just kind of get that connection with their body and understands. And like I never understood because I swear my cycles, like I am up here. It's like ovulation and the first half of my luteal. I'm like high energy. I can do so much stuff. And then within 1 second, it's like I'm coming down and like I didn't have that awareness. I'd be like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so tired? It was just like those little signs that I was ignoring, that
Mm-hmm.
intuition of saying like it's time to take a step back. Let's complete those projects because you're going to need this time to reflect and rest. And when I listen to those signs, my intuition is so much higher. My ideas and everything comes full circle if I allow that time to kind of rest and retract. And so I love that. My journey had started because I got off birth control. I was on it for a very, very long time and I did not know how to experience a cycle. And that scared me. And so it took me researching all these things to try and figure out how can I master my cycle? How can I get into a place where I am experiencing it by myself, not being told by, a hormonal birth control what I should be doing. And
Right.
so it was like a huge realization. And so I love that you have found that. I feel like a lot of intuitive people are finding that on their own. And so I love that they're coming into that. You're ultimately using it to your advantage. Like I say, these things are like our operation manual. And if we just understand how we operate as a person, like we can really propel ourselves in our future. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
My friend sent me this meme that was like, it turns out that I'm not crazy. It's just my luteal phase. Like, because we always have that moment where we're like, what is going on with me? And then your period starts and you're like almost like relieved. Like, of course, all emotions are valid at any point in time, but it's just, having that awareness that they're going to feel even more raw. Or the pendulum's going to be swinging like on a wider level during that time, and it's definitely a time for rest and kind of like hibernation.
For sure. I also had reflective trip. I had the beautiful opportunity to go to Switzerland. I didn't know it was on my bucket list until I started to plan it. I love taking pictures, and these are things that feed my soul. And I went with someone who they were going to have to do some work, and I did have time to myself. I felt a little guilty that I was going without my husband, but those moments to be able to be by myself and focus on myself, and I had so much clarity in like what I want in my business, what I want in my life. And so I think there's just something to be said of when you can be by yourself, you cut out that technology and you just really connect with yourself. Like there is so much profoundness in there and in that. And I would love to know like if there was anything that like came forth for you while you were on that trip, for yourself, your business, however it can kind of empower you.
Totally. Yeah, many things. I mean, I think it's so easy even when we are alone. It's different than being alone than being with yourself, in that sometimes we can reach for that distraction or scrolling on our phone or whatever. And so it does take a lot of discipline and self-love to say like my time is valuable and I'm going to sit with myself in this time versus distract myself or be elsewhere. And the way I think about it for myself and how I've described it to my clients is like you have, in which you do have children, but it's like you have a child and it's a much different experience to like take them to an amusement park and be on your phone the whole time than to really like be with them in that experience, experiencing that joy, riding the rides with them. And so I kind of like think about that when I'm alone, is like, how am I treating little Meredith? Am I really being like present with her? Or am I kind of being distracted? So a few musings came up. I re-listened to a bunch of my favorite books, such as A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, The Four Agreements, and Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks. And all of these books had been, at some point in my journey, really foundational, pivotal points I thought about myself, what was possible for myself. And the message that kept coming up, like all of my questions are answered, and it's slowing down and in tapping back into my intuition. And I booked a spiritual advising session with a monk. So we weren't allowed to speak at the monastery for the 2 days that I was there, but you could schedule a spiritual advising session with a monk. So of course I did it because I'm like, this sounds like an awesome experience. And that was the one time I could speak. And the monk told me, life is kind of like being in a candy store. We're trying all these different candies and having all these different experiences. And it's in the stillness that we actually allow for the digestion. So if we keep going from one high to the next, we're eventually going to get so full that we won't even know we're full. We're going to make ourselves sick because we're not listening to our intuition about like slowing down, eating, digesting, seeing which foods sat well with us, seeing which ones didn't. And he's like, that's why this stillness and this alone time is so important, because it's the digestion. It's the coming to awareness of which things are feeding you and which things are draining you. So those were some of my bigger takeaways. And then I think like on a personal note for kind of my path forward, I realized that I had some resistance around taking my next big swing with my own business, which is what I encourage my clients to do. So I put my money where my mouth is, kind of took myself through some of the similar questions I would ask my clients of like, why is this resistance coming up? Is there a deepest fear here? What do I fear will happen if I fail? What do I fear will happen if I am wildly successful? And what's like the next little step I can take? And really coming back to that trust in my ability to slow down and just focus on the next step and then the step after that. I think was also very powerful and has put things into greater momentum upon returning to Los Angeles.
Yeah, all of that is beautiful. I really felt with what the monk was saying, a lot of what I've been hearing is talking about how many people are in their like freeze, flight, or fight mode.
Mm-hmm.
And if ultimately, like I feel like so many people have digestive issues is because they're not really allowing digestion with their food, but also so many other things because they're always moving so quickly. And I think there's a lot of stem from that because they don't know how to be with themselves. They don't know how to kind of have that self reflection and say, like, how did this make me feel today? Not even allowing their experience to kind of come forth. And so, like, I felt there was like a lot of that, that so many people have dysregulated nervous systems because they're always going, they're always moving. And like, there's not that moment of being like, let me just put my phone down. Let me not watch TV. It's always like, let's get to the next thing. I also read the Four Agreements on my trip as well. That was
I
one
love
that
that.
it's just, it's like such a simple, profound book that I mean, I feel like everyone should read it, especially being a coach, for sure, just because it's basic things so many of us have forgotten of, like, or we just don't know that those are so important in that. Just like coming back refreshed, like you're ready to take on the world. Another book that I read that, if you wouldn't mind me, if it feels called for you to read it, is
Yeah.
called The Big Leap. And I don't know if you've read that one, but it has a lot of what you were saying, that fear of taking that step. And it's ultimately stepping into your zone of genius,
Mm-hmm.
going past your zone of excellence and going into your zone of genius and really
Mm.
propelling yourself forward. And so that was one that I read. I always feel like books come into your life when you need them the most. And it was a really profound book that I really enjoyed on my trip as well.
Oh, I'll have to look at that. I love the name, The Big Leap, because that's always what we're working toward. And yeah, that sounds awesome and very timely. So I'm excited to check that one out.
Yeah, one of his affirmations, I have it on my desk, and it's, I expand in abundant success and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. And I feel like really everyone could live by that. And it's been my mantra anytime I do a podcast episode, I do a coaching session, anything that I know I'm going to be interacting with other people. If I can just make that intention that I am expanding in success and love and abundance. And I hope that that inspires other people to do it. So,
I
yeah, add
love
that to
that.
the book list. Are you ready to make a real change in your life? Here are just a few benefits on working with me as a certified holistic coach. Together, we gain insight into your authentic self. We explore your design with modalities like human design, psychovitality, and astrology. And you'll gain a deeper understanding of your unique strengths, challenges, and your purpose in life. Together, we work on improving relationships. Understanding your own design helps you communicate more effectively with other people, build stronger relationships, and have more fulfilling connections around you. We increase your productivity. By aligning your work with your natural rhythms and your strengths, you'll be able to work smarter and not harder, achieve your goals, and live with a greater ease in your life. We work together on reducing stress and overwhelm. By working with me, you'll learn how to manage your energy, reduce stress, and cultivate more balance in your life. We work on a more authentic life. When you're aligned with your unique design, you'll feel more confident, empowered, and fulfilled in every area of your life. Those are the benefits with working with me. As a certified intuitive life coach, my focus is not telling people about their human design, psycho vitality, or even astrology. Instead, my role is to help you discover and align with your desires and take aligned action based on how you operate. It is time for you to look within at how powerful you are and welcome your intuitive intelligence. If you want to work with me, head to karadempsey.com/offerings.
Totally. Well, yeah. And that actually made me think of when we walk the fire in trusting ourselves and taking those big leaps, it's really serving as a beacon for other people to do the same. And that was part of, like, on a deeper level, what you just shared kind of reminded me too of another thing I asked myself was, how am I living in total alignment? Like, how am I living as the coach my clients think I am? And are there things that I'm not doing that if I were my coach, I would be telling myself to do or to work on? And so it was just a really amazing kind of realigning of every single area in my life, because it's so easy to see other people's lives and what they can do to optimize their potential. And then to do it yourself creates a whole nother level of permission, of magnetism, of energy for yourself and for the other people that you work with, that you coach, that you're friends with. So that was another thing that I asked myself on that week, of how could I live in even greater alignment? And, how we do it one thing is how we do everything. So it's like, what is my weakest link and how can I supercharge that?
Yeah, I love that. And it's just that self-reflection. Just feel like that's a big piece of being honest with ourselves and saying, like, is there something that I am, not giving it my all, but I'm making people think I'm giving it my all, and where can I kind of step up to that? I've seen some things that you've talked about, and I would love to know, like, how you've used maybe that inner critic and that external judgment as like fuel in your business and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. How I've developed my methodology and who I work with and why is because I came from that high achiever background where it was always on the hamster wheel of what's the next thing, what's the next thing to be achieving, and then getting the next thing. And maybe you get a dopamine hit for a short second, and then it's on to like the next thing. Our inner critic or external judgment in a way can show us how much we can be fueled in the manpower that we do have to get things done. The slowing down and separation is then asking ourselves, like, what are all the things I'm like that I'm doing because of these shoulds? Either it's what my internal voice is telling me or what I think these external judgments will be. What would it look like to live fully expressed in who I am or in what I love? And what do I fear others will say, or what do I fear I'll say about myself if I do that? And then I go and address these fears almost like a loving, again, like a loving maternal voice to these fears of, I understand that you're doing this because you want to keep me safe. And thank you so much for that. And I can take it from here. Like, so rather than like having a vicious cycle with our inner critic or these perceived judgments of like, why is my inner critic so mean? Like, I need it to shut up. Positive affirmations. It's like having that nice, nurturing maternal voice to it of like, thank you. I know it's coming from a place of you wanting to keep me safe, you wanting me to, have my best intentions at heart. And I see that. And actually, I've created a path forward, but I love you nonetheless. And it's kind of having that unconditional love for all parts of ourselves, our shadow parts, these judgments, and then taking like the good silver linings out of them, which is, again, like, if we can do this much or achieve this much doing something that we don't love or that we were doing out of a need for validation, imagine how much we can do when it is something that we love. And so that's kind of how I really move through it and encourage my clients to move through it, is through that initial compassionate awareness of what's going on. What are these stories telling you? Like, thanking them or forgiving yourself, and then finding that silver lining of, what would it look like to take all this energy that I was putting toward these shoulds and put it toward this thing that I actually feel really inspired by.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you've ultimately nurtured your inner child and like are reparenting yourself like through this like growth. I can't speak this for you, but I know a lot of people have maybe not been emotionally supported in their childhood. And so that's a huge piece to it and a beautiful thing that you're like saying, like, this is okay for you to feel this way, but let's not grab onto this. Let's kind of push ourselves past that. And so I really feel that, because I know with my inner child, like, she wants to be nurtured and acknowledged. Like, why are you feeling that way? And not even acknowledging that I have those feelings. And
Right.
so, yeah, thank you for sharing. That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. It's always a practice. One analogy that I actually thought of, because I was walking on the beach when it was raining last week. And, I had another like difficult emotion come up, and it's so easy after like a peak experience, whether it be a ceremony or a solo trip, where you're like, I have uncovered the keys to the universe and now I'm all set, and then you get another trigger and you're like, oh, like, I should have been healed by now, I thought I fixed this. It was a good reminder that those things come up again, even after we've had a peak experience, because those peak experiences have expanded our capacity for compassion, for self-love. These triggers or these difficult emotions are coming up again, so we can get even deeper to the root, so we can alchemize that soil even more. And I had this analogy that I thought of when I was walking on the beach of like, if you're caught in a rip current, which pushes you out to sea, you're not supposed to swim against it to try to get to shore, because you'll exhaust yourself and, it puts you at risk of drowning. What you're actually instructed to do is to swim with the rip current, because it eventually ends, and then parallel to shore. And that's how then you can safely exit the rip current and get back to shore. And it made me think of processing some of our heavier emotions. It's so easy to want to resist them and to just push them down, kind of like the swimming against the rip current, versus, okay, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry. What would it look like to give myself a safe space to express this? Like taking a bath and crying, or going for a car ride and screaming, or just letting myself be sad today, knowing that I'm not going to dwell in it, but I'm just going to allow myself to experience it. And then trusting that when we actually give that allowance, we stop this resistance, we're able to then exit it with more clarity, with more grace, with more ease.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. One, you must have known like the next prompt that I was going to be talking about. But part of that is I had a very similar situation of like, I went on this beautiful trip. I felt very like fulfilled with my soul. I had so much clarity. And then I had some like moments of just like overwhelming emotions and just some things coming at me. And it was like, I think how I came across you was exactly this video about how right before we expand into that next version of ourselves, like the universe tests us. Like, are we going to be the victim in this and kind of hold ourselves down? And, or what are we going to do to not discouraged and like keep moving forward when this happens? And so, one, it makes me feel like seen and heard that you had a very similar situation of like, wait a second, we were on such a high and now we're back down to a low.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do think that's the case. The universe is testing us. How are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? And that analogy is so profound because so many of us fight it. And they say that an emotion only lasts 90 seconds, but most of us won't even give ourselves that 90 seconds to feel it and process it and kind of let it through. And that was one thing that I was like, sit in it, feel what you're feeling, journal what you need to. But yeah, I would love like any more insight that you would maybe have on that whole, like the universe is testing us. We're about to expand. And so do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. So that awareness really came from exactly like you said, like we leave an experience, we have an insight, and it's almost like we are experiencing turbulence as an airplane, like going through at this new frequency. And rather than like drop down and be like, I guess I can't handle it, it's like, how can I recommit to my new choice, to my new behavior, to show that I can hold this frequency throughout whatever like life throws at me. And when we show ourselves and prove to ourselves that we can do that, that's when we develop deeper self-trust and we're able to hold that frequency for longer. And I say the universe gives us a test, and obviously I'm speaking metaphorically. And what I truly mean, because I believe that we are, in radical ownership of how we respond to everything in our life, cultivate deep awareness, is that we are given a opportunity to make a new choice, and to replace an old reaction with a new empowered behavior that is more aligned with how we want to show up in the world as our highest self. And when we take these little moments or these little triggers where something difficult is like testing us, and we make this new choice, even though it feels hard or uncomfortable or unfamiliar in the moment, that's when we build that self-trust of I've got me. And it's these tiny shifts over time that lead to big changes in complete like shifts in our path and in how we show up in the world. And so it's having equanimity, really. It's being able to exist at that frequency, not just when everything's going great and when things are all working out for you, but when times are hard, can I maintain the same frequency regardless if it's a good time or a bad? And in that consistency is our growth into our next version of self.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And I think another important piece that you said, like, is those little shifts. I feel like so many people think like you just wake up one day having all these practices in place, and it's just like being able to kind of wake up each day and say, need a little bit more support in this area. What can I do? What can I replace? Maybe picking up my phone first thing in the morning. That's not bringing the best version of myself. What is that little thing I can do and step instead? Okay, like for me to be able to pick up my phone, it is, meditating or reading a book. If you want to intake information, like let's listen to an audiobook for a little bit. It is those like little micro shifts that I feel like that really help propel you into that version of yourself, because you're not going to just wake up one day wanting to work out, meditate, journal, do all these things. It's like that self-awareness of like what can support you each and every day to be that version that you want to be.
Totally. And on that note, it reminds me of an exercise that I did the year that I met my partner, Spencer. I had been single for many years, and the guys that I did date were like emotionally unavailable. And I did this ideal scene where I wrote out all of the things that I would like to feel with my ideal partner. Like we are waking up in bed, giving each other full presence in the morning. We are holding each other at our best, even when we feel at our worst. We are planning spontaneous adventures with each other. And then I looked at this list I wrote for my ideal partner, and I asked myself, which one of these am I being for myself right now? And which ones am I not? Because it's not like a partner comes in and changes those things for us. It's like we create that empowerment for ourselves, and then we magnetize our partner from there. And so one of them, like you said with the phone, was, I wanted a partner who would be present, waking up with me in bed, us like having pillow talk and starting our day and meditating together. And yet my phone was right by my bed. And so I wasn't even giving myself this presence in the morning. So how could I expect someone else to come in and create that space for me? So I got a Echo Dot alarm clock, and I started leaving my phone outside of my room. And that's just a tiny example of showing myself I can be that person that I want to call in. It was an empowering shift. And lo and behold, 6 months after doing that exercise and making those changes is when I met my partner.
Yes, like that 1,000 times over. I think there's so many people that they play a little bit on the victim side of like, I wish I would get more support here, or I would do that. I was one of those people, and I was feeling very unsupported in my life. And then I took a moment to say, wait a second. What do I need to do in my life that to feel support? What do I have control over? And I felt like I started calling in those relationships of people that were supporting me in my business ventures and whatever that is, whatever I was craving, when I started giving it to myself. And I think that's such a place of like working with the universe, is like the universe will give you what you desire as long as you have the power to give it to yourself first. And that's so empowering. I'm so happy that you brought that up. And I think that was one of those things that I had noticed, that your purpose framework is unblock, visualize, create, and integrate. You were like blocking yourself of this vision that you wanted, and that you had that awareness to unblock it. But I would like to know if there's a way that you could maybe tell listeners on how maybe they can find their block of what they're trying to work through and their self-limiting beliefs to empower them to make those choices forward.
Yeah. So kind of like identifying what those blocks are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in my group coaching program, the upgrade, we start off by doing a lifestyle audit where we see what's cluttering our life, what are the shoulds, what are the things that actually light us up. And once we get clear on that, then we go into what are the patterns, what are the blind spots that we might not be seeing. So it's really anything that keeps agitating you, that keeps either agitating you in a friendship or a relationship. It might be a pattern that you notice, like why me? If you find yourself saying, why me? Why do I always attract these type of bosses or these type of partners? Why do relationships always end in this way? That's a pattern. And when we look at it, we might say, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, those guys were dicks to me. But when I took radical ownership over my relationship patterns, because I was typically with guys who are emotionally unavailable, and I would give so much, and then I'd feel resentful for giving, and then it would end. I was just giving them my value for like pennies. The radical ownership of that is like, I was allowing myself to be treated that way. I chose to stay. I chose to do those things. So what part of my self-love do I need to heal to trust in my value and to honor it more? So those would be my recommendations to finding the blocks. Looking for patterns, looking for things that agitate you, looking for things that you find resistance to. And an exercise I actually have my women do in the group container is I have them reach out to 3 close people in their life, usually like a family member, or friend, or a partner, but 3 people in different areas of their life, and ask them lovingly, is there a blind spot or something you see that I'm doing that gets in the way of my growth? Usually, the funny thing is it's usually not surprising. It's usually something that we do that we think no one notices, or we kind of have cognitive dissonance around it. But then when we hear someone we love, who we know has our best interests at heart, mirror it back to us, it just like hits different.
Yeah, definitely. That's so empowering. And then it's a good way to kind of help them pick it out. Like if it's a reoccurring situation and understanding what might frustrate you or aggravate you, and kind of take a step back. And then those type of exercises, when you have to like go, like I am okay with doing all the things and then covering all the things. But yeah, when I have to ask for someone and something I need to work on, when I have to ask someone for feedback or whatever that is, it takes you out of that comfort zone. But yeah, you'll get the answers you need. And I think that's probably it. Like, are we afraid to hear that feedback from those who, we probably hold at a higher standard because they're our friends or they're our family? That's a great tip and great suggestions to help people uncover. I know I have blocks, but sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint, like, what is the block? Like, what is really the block uncovering it? And so I'm going to put that in my toolbox and see what comes forth. And I might need to do some journaling on that. You had mentioned that you have a group program.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know all your offerings, and maybe if you can tell listeners how they can find you.
Yeah, amazing. So my signature program is called the Upgrade. It's a 12-week transformational program for female leaders who feel unbalanced in different areas of their life, or like they're letting the shoulds run their life. They're feeling like they're not fully expressing their voice. And we really go through 3 phases. We first look at all of their patterns and self-limiting beliefs. Where did they come from? Why are they still showing up in the present moment? And how are they affecting us in other areas of our life? What is the cost if we don't change them? So we get really comfortable looking at the, the dirt and and the murkiness that we often try to avoid. And then we take that and we do shadow work of learning to love and accept our shadow, knowing that, all of those things were developed at some point in time in our childhood to protect us, and to thank those things for showing up. We no longer need them. And what is the new empowering narrative around them? How do we want to transform them into our new empowered story? So we do some embodiment exercises around this, some subconscious journaling around this. And then the second part is really owning our new narrative and going from victim to victor in all these different areas of our life, claiming our new beliefs. And the third part is then integrating that in different specifics, like our relationship to money and finances, our relationships to pleasure, and letting our pleasure guide us as women. And then combining all of these to alchemize a few other things, like overcoming imposter syndrome and really like stepping into the energetics of our feminine leadership. So that's my signature group offering. I run that once a quarter, and I'm actually working on an evergreen course for it now, which I'm really excited about. But I run it once a quarter live, and part of the amazing thing is the women in the container and all of them supporting each other in our signal group in between each session, and becoming friends with each other, going on hikes together. And it's been amazing to see some of the results the women have gotten since, like going to biz school, starting their own businesses, sharing their creative work publicly for the first time, finding empowered and deep relationships after heartbreak. That's something I'm really excited about. And then I also do one-on-one coaching with both men and women. A lot of entrepreneurs who are kind of looking for deeper peace and deeper meaning of fulfillment and purpose in their lives. And then I have an experience company. So if anyone listening is in Los Angeles, my experience company is called More of That. I co-founded it with my friend Eric Dibvig, and we lead experiences that get people out of their social comfort zones and give them a social alternative to the bar as a way to connect more deeply to themselves and others. So you can find all of that on Instagram or TikTok at the Meredith Baker or themeredithbaker.com. And then more of that is moreofthat.life on the website.
Yeah, I will definitely have all those links in the show notes. So check that out. The group program sounds amazing, especially having that connection with other women in their growth. I think that sounds like that like nurturing piece that we were talking about. And of course, one-on-one coaches, that's like transformed my life, being able to work with people. So it's always nice when you can really work with someone one-on-one. And I love that you've created something that's social, that's not the bar. I think that's a problem, like with so many people. It's like that's not where they want to go to social and interact. And so having other experiences. So what are some like experiences that you do with that business?
We've done things like networking, where you're not allowed to talk about your job. And then you come in and we have all these different like creative or icebreaker stations for people to get to meet each other on a human level first. We've done deep house blacklight yoga with a DJ, and I'll lead yoga, and we'll have like glow in the dark balls and body art, and just kind of like a Friday night alternative to going out to a club. And then we're actually planning this one now called Spring Fest, which will be like a spring kind of reemergence from hibernation festival, where we'll have lawn games and carnival games. And then we'll do dinner under the stars, line dancing, and campfire songs at night, but really just a way to let ourselves like play as adults and re-tap into our creativity, and kind of having the idea that all of these other strangers that are there are people seeking the same thing, and strangers are friends you haven't met yet.
I love that. So it is open for like friendship, and if you so happen to meet someone that you had interest with that would work into it. But I love that it's just kind of like adults making friends. And I bet LA is a perfect area because so many people like transplant themselves there. So you move to a new area and you're like, how am I going to meet people? I don't go out, I don't drink. And so I love that. That's so creative. That's awesome.
Well, hopefully if you come out to LA, we'll have it align with more of that event so you can come and experience it. But yeah, like you said, it's just like a fun way for people to meet. And a lot of people come to more of that experiences who have just moved to LA, and they're like, this is the community I didn't know I needed. So it's nice to have like the coaching side of my life and then get to kind of do community building and community experiences in real time as well. It's like a nice kind of merging of the individual and the long-term deep work, and like creating these moments of deep presence.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love all that you're putting out there. That's so awesome. I'm really happy to connect with you. And yeah, thank you for coming on to the show. I appreciate it, Meredith.
Thank you so much, Kara. This was great. And I'm excited to go back to my float activity after this podcast ends. So perfect start to the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll chat soon. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If this was your first time, welcome. And if you joined me for previous episodes, thank you so much for coming back. If you haven't yet, subscribe and share this with a friend. Those few seconds make a big impact on my show, and I'd be grateful for the support. This interview with Meredith was so insightful and synchronistic that we both came back from life-changing trips. If you want to find out how to connect with her, check the show notes and all the links mentioned at karadempsey.com/66. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll chat soon.